A robot voice has said recording in progress. We all know what that means. It must be August 14th, 2025, and you are here for Michael Van Vleet's presentation on The Pitch. If you have arrived here in error, there's plenty of time to find an exit and make your way out in an orderly fashion. Please try not to elbow those who actually intended to attend. Thank you, Council of Smug Men, for the reminder to record. Here's what we're here for. Our presentation today is called The Pitch, otherwise known as The Art of Convincing Other People Your Ideas Are Good, actually. What we're going to be talking about is the art of trying to get someone else to give you money for a thing you want to create. Creating stuff is hard enough. It gets all the harder when you decide you want some money for it. Many people go the route of self-publishing, and we salute them. But it's so much sweeter when you get somebody else's money for it. So if that is at all possible, let's try and improve our odds. The lady working out in the desert is not connected to anything. I just like her energy. Just get pumped. All right, so here's the agenda, what we're going to go through and in what order. We start off with, who the heck is Michael Van Vleet? Some of you attending are just, I don't know, here to be kind. You have no idea who I am or what my credentials are. Thanks for showing up. We'll also be covering things to think about before you consider making a pitch. I will go over the best in-person pitch I ever personally did. We'll talk about knowing your market, pitch essentials, common mistakes. Also, a bit of housekeeping up top. We are recording, so if you are viewing this from the vantage point of the future and can send a message back to tell us how all of this turned out, we'd appreciate it. Also, any stock tips. Please don't tell me the day I die. Want it to be a surprise. Yeah, thank you to all of you who are here on camera. I appreciate the company, so it doesn't feel like I'm talking to black squares, but it is not required. If at any time you want to drop off video, if you want to stay mute the whole time, feel free. I am the only person obligated to be here the whole time. I appreciate you showing up in whatever way, shape, or form you like, including Brian with the nice new haircut and the dead doll eyes of a shark. So let's start off with, who the heck is Michael Van Vleet? I took the time to put this nice slide together and then realized, what am I going to do? Read you a slide? No. You all know how to read. Let's just sit here quietly and take a look at all those credits. That's beautiful.
There is perchance that this might go into podcast form, so this will be the awkward moment of that.
Here's the thing. During my day job, some of my responsibilities are around translation and accessibility. So thank you for the reminder that if we're doing a podcast, I should also be engaging in visual descriptions. I am a middle-aged bearded guy wearing black glasses. I'm in a room surrounded by tchotchkes and horror-related posters. Towering behind me is a blue vampire lady on the wall, safely inside a frame. We are looking at an illustration by the Japanese illustrator Shintaro Keigo, who I paid to draw my likeness. He made one little mistake. He included a zipper being unzipped down the middle of my face and revealing the same face underneath. Easy mistake to make, but he's a professional. I have every faith he'll do better. The bio reads, I can't believe I have to actually read this aloud.
I can read it for you, and I can just
Brian, would you please read this bio?
mispronounce every other word or something if you'd
Please.
like. This is Michael Van Vleet. Michael lives in El Cerrito, California, across the bay from San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. He's the author of the Weird West Trophy Dark one-shot, Devil Aim for Me, and a co-creator of the Emmy Award-winning The Wassailing of Klaus Manor. Michael contributed to many projects from the Gauntlet, including the Trophy Core Books, Brindlewood Bay, Public Access, and more. It's worth noting he likes putting game titles in all caps.
Yeah, I don't know. Bold just isn't enough. All right, so let's go over a little bit of personal history, because I think it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about. I played a few games as a youth, including a bit of Vampire in high school and college, and then was like, well, that's enough role-playing games for me. So I thought. Then I fell in with the rascals at the Gauntlet who were doing things like running a forum where you could contribute to the Codex zine just by putting interesting little ideas into a miscellany. And they were developing a game called Trophy Dark, which I fell in love with because it was pretty close to just writing straightforward narrative, but with a little bit of a gamification to it. So they held a Trophy Dark incursion writing contest in 2020. I submitted my first significant writing project as an adult and was one of several people to score a shared second place. There was a winner, and then 3 people where they're like, you guys are also good. You're all runners up. Great. But what that led to was I got invited to contribute to the Trophy Gold and Trophy Loom projects. So in addition to my Trophy Dark project getting in there, I got to write a whole bunch of new world building stuff and a sequel to my Trophy Dark incursion, which led to getting invited to write some of the first scenarios ever for public access. Back when Jason Cordova only had a rough idea for what public access could be, I was one of the people he reached out to and said, here are all the vibes. Does this bring anything out for you? And then what did I turn around and do? I pitched some ideas, and one of them got in. Another's in limbo. Here's another thing. Pitching is a numbers game. After that, having a track record of working with the Gauntlet, as well as writing my own Gauntlet adjacent material that I was self-publishing, I started attending Gauntlet writing retreats, each of which included a live pitch element. So I've had plenty of opportunities to see other people try and summarize their games, some of them better than others. And I have had friends tell me that I seem to be pretty good at it, which is how I got rooked into doing this presentation. So another free tip, have good friends that know what your strengths are and push you to do things. It's super handy. So kind of leads into this one big, before you even think about pitching anything, like kind of ground setting, being reliable and communicating well are more important than having the best ideas. It's kind of an ugly truth, right? You will see a lot of people get published with stuff where you read it and you're like, I could do that, or I could do better than that. Maybe you could. But here's the thing, somebody reached out to them and they probably delivered something on time and they didn't make their publisher nervous about them coming in late, missing some sort of an important deadline, etc. Also, it's an ugly truism, but it is not what you know, but who you know. So, getting to know people in the tabletop role playing community, making friends, collaborating on things, talking about games, playing games, all important. Every single person that you are sharing one of these Zoom rooms with, every other people who are listening to this podcast, you are all potential community and friends, and you should get to know each other because you never know which of you is going to be able to put you in a position to succeed in the future. I'm not saying like, let's all be snake-like capitalists, right? It's not like, who can I use? Who's the best person to know? Who's got the connections? It's not like that. You don't have competitors, you have peers. Please, if you take one thing away from any of this presentation, it's
It's
try and
another
have no
power
enemies.
outage.
Michael,
Yes.
you just froze for a good solid minute.
Yeah.
The crazy thing is, you talked about being snake-like, and then I was like, "Oh, this is a thing. He's staring. He's not gonna blink."
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was a real thing you were like a bit or not.
Oh my gosh.
You'll never know.
Okay,
You'll never know if it's a bit or not. All
Fantastic.
right, are we back?
we're back.
Yes.
Great. So to go back to my snake-like point, I essentially want to say if there's one big takeaway, it's that you do not have competitors in this industry. You have peers. Don't be looking at the people in the industry as what can they do for me, uh, because people can smell that and it makes everybody feel bad and it usually doesn't work. What does work is find people that you genuinely enjoy being around who have shared interests and different skill sets and learn how to use each other's skill sets, right? So that they're complementary, lift everybody up. Then when one person makes it, they already have a community of other people that they can invite to work on future projects. One person makes it, they make it easier to lift everybody else up into it. Okay, so I'm going to start off by talking about the best pitch that I ever did. Brindlewood Bay. So, for those who are listening to a recording, we are looking at a slide that says Spotlight, Squatch Your Step, the best in person pitch I ever did. On the left side, there is an amazing painting that I found of a Bigfoot having something handed to him by, I don't know if this is a blonde child or a full grown woman. Sasquatches are very tall. And a little black dog. They're in a nice forest near a lake. It's kind of a quiet scene. So, at one of the Gauntlet retreats, they were looking for additional scenarios for Brindlewood Bay. If you don't know what Brindlewood Bay is, the real quick pitch is it's like Murder, She Wrote crossed with the works of H.P. Lovecraft. You've got little old ladies solving mysteries. You've also got cosmic horror, possibly tentacles, supernatural stuff. And I had a bunch of ideas, most of them half-baked. The one that I had that was the most developed was based on an article that I just happened to read off of Weblog. I think it was off ESPN, where I had read that there were some people that went into upstate New York and had an annual gathering where they would do Sasquatch calls. So that's the background. That's what I had going in. And I thought, what a great setting for a mystery. So when we were all gathered to make the pitch, I said that I had one from Brindlewood Bay and I asked for silence. And then I clicked on this. Beautiful. Just beautiful. Those are Sasquatch calls from a YouTube video that I had queued up on my laptop. So while everyone was staring at me, wondering why I had asked them to be quiet, the silence was broken by people bellowing like Sasquatches. And then I made the pitch and I said, here's the event. The Mavens go to it. Last year's champion, Champlain Bellows, has been kidnapped and it looks like his trailer's been torn apart. Was it the actual work of a Sasquatch? Was his Sasquatch call too accurate? Or is somebody trying to take last year's champion out of the picture? He said, our Mavens have been called out there to be guest judges. And the most fun part, I think, is that everybody should be invited to contribute their own Sasquatch calls while the others get to do their judging. So a chance to pretend that you are also a competitor. And I ended up writing a special move as a reward. Like I didn't have it at the time of the pitch, but it occurred to me, wouldn't it be fun is if you solve this, you get a move that says you can do a Sasquatch bellow and it gives you some kind of mechanical advantage. So that was the best in-person pitch that I ever made. Pretty much as soon as I talked about Champlain Bellows getting kidnapped by a Sasquatch, Jason already said it was sold. And the rest was just a matter of actually writing it. So, credentials thus established, let's get back into this. First, pitching is more an art than a science. There's a whole cottage industry of people out there that will want to sell you safety goggles, lab jackets, Bunsen burners. You don't need any of that. That is actually for science. When we're pitching the things that we're writing, we're on the art side of things, baby. And that means everything that I tell you is going to be context dependent, and you'll need to take it with a grain of salt and will not be universally applicable. But we're going to try and give you some tools that you can use no matter what the context is that you find yourself in. Here's where the trouble starts. Every single one of you looking at this image of swirling abstract colors on different panels with labels on top that read an idea, another idea. Oh no, not another idea. And please, brain, just pick one. We've all been here. I think everybody listening to this is familiar with the idea that ideas are easy. Everybody on the planet has ideas all the time. It's picking them out and figuring out where is it worth putting in the effort to bring an idea to completion, right? Because so few of our ideas actually make it to a final polished form. There's just not enough time and energy in a human lifetime to do all the things that we would love to do. So we've got all these ideas swirling around in our head. How do we find a home for them? The trick is honestly knowing your market. Like you have to be familiar with what is being purchased, what there is an audience for, where the money is. And this involves a bit of research. And it involves making sure that your content matches the audience that you're sending it to. I will tell you that every publisher out there gets hit with piles of AI slop. They get hit with easy emails with attachments of projects that have literally nothing to do with what they publish because we live in an era where email is free. And so there are unscrupulous fellows in our industry and hobby space who think nothing of papering the entire world like any sort of spammer, hoping against hope that 0.1% of their efforts will pay off and they'll get some sort of a response. That is to some extent who you're up against, and that means that if you can demonstrate that you know the market that you are reaching out to, it puts you head and shoulders above your competition who hasn't bothered to learn any of this. They've just got a list of emails, a list of addresses, and they're sending their stuff as widely as they can. So on screen it says, know your market. Don't pitch a body horror project to a publisher of maritime romances. Unless, all right, if you come up with the idea, my tongue became a crab of love, maybe you got something. If you find the right publisher. Right. So the whole reason we're here is I could say all day, you got to have ideas. You got to know your market. We are on a slide that says in all caps, okay, but like how? Great question, slide. Let's look at some potential audiences out there, right? Some potential publishers, some potential purchasers. These are sorts of people that we see out there in the market on social media, right? There's different types. Our first one, there is a photo of a young Asian lady. It is labeled Janathan, small publisher, not her real name. And some bullet points that say suite of published games and supplements, crowdfunding, subscriber content. This sort of profile might seem familiar to those of us who have been Gauntlet adjacent for a while. This kind of represents a publisher who has a track record at this point, and they also have an audience that they need to keep feeding in order to stay relevant, to keep their audience excited, and to make sure that their games have some sort of a shelf life and to keep that audience engaged so that they are around at the time that they're going to publish the next project. We also have this bearded guy in a suit. His name is Human Suit Full of Bees. He's an entrepreneur. Other than his mysterious humming, he's also mostly self-publishing. So we can see that this entrepreneur has their own projects. That doesn't mean that they don't have money to spend. There are individuals who are doing their own thing, and nevertheless, you'll find them reaching out to get help with art, with writing, with editing, with layout. There are a lot of opportunities to those of us working in the modern era that weren't available in the decades past, right? With the advent of desktop publishing, with the advent of relatively cost-free marketplaces like DriveThruRPG, itch.io, Shopify, getting your own website is relatively cheap. There are a lot of ways that individuals can go their own way and yet still potentially be an audience for the projects that you want to work with. The honey production is kind of weird, though. And then we have a photo of another young lady, Lamathaniel, representing an LLC. Bullet points read, open calls for submissions via social media, paid like real money for a logo, and they are real professional. They got submission guidelines. They have actual contracts they make you fill out. There are some established entities who have been around for quite a while at this point. they still may not be big companies, but they do things at a professional level, meaning they may know what they're publishing 2, 3 years in advance. They may reach out via their various social media outlets, etc. So it behooves you to actually go find and follow them to find out what they're looking for and when. And then finally, there's this guy's a mistake. Honestly, there's another guy with like 5 o'clock shadow, Captain Buster. He's a captain, lives in international waters. He's heavily into crypto. He's also aware of his fictional status and presence in this slideshow. If he says anything to you, just go ahead and ignore it. Haven't found a way to get him off of the slide. Probably has never purchased an RPG thing in his life. Even if he did, how would you get it out to him in international waters? It's ridiculous. Get out of here, Captain Buster. To hunt the publisher, one must think like the publisher. So what do they want? How do you find it out? Here are the sorts of things that you're looking for anybody who is publishing and may have a checkbook, which is of interest to us. 1, active solicitations, right? This is the easy stuff. I say, what are they actively saying they're looking for? B, track record. What have they solicited in the past? So this, unless this is literally their first project, you can probably go back and see what sorts of projects they've solicited. Also, you can find this stuff out by working your community. Say, I'm thinking about pitching for this particular publisher. What sorts of things have you seen them do? Have you worked with them? Do you know anyone who's worked with them? Get to know their track record. This is also, by the way, a great time to find out, oh, they always pay late. Oh, they've had several projects that we signed on to that just vanished when their Kickstarter tanked or what have you. There are a number of broken stairs in every community, and that includes ours. Ask around to make sure you're not getting into bed with someone who's already been canceled and word hasn't made it to you yet. Finally, their body of work. Like what's the range of projects they've put out and how does yours relate to it? The more things that a particular publisher or individual who publishes has put out, the more they will start to establish a brand, and that will give you an idea of the range of ideas that they would be interested in. Again, if you come in with the body horror to maritime romance, it's going to be a mismatch. It will be a harder pitch for them to take your project seriously because it may not fit their established brand. Any of you that have spent any time in the Gauntlet orbit will probably have heard that your pitch should probably answer the question, where's the vampire? What that is shorthand for is Gauntlet projects almost always include some sort of supernatural antagonistic force. Public Access has got it. The Between has got it. Silt Versus, oh boy, has it got it. So many monsters. For those listening to the podcast, I also threw in a little comic panel in here of a person looking at a shop that says Ancient and Occult Books, though the windows above have been nailed shut. He's thinking to himself, perhaps I can find a rare book to take my mind off the grim thoughts which harass me, and the occult world may have an answer to my problem. Don't discount the occult world. The occult world has more answers than you would think. And the reason for that is because it's a cult. It's hiding all the things, all the info. You can't get these kind of tips from anywhere. Like this is gold I'm giving you. The next thing that I want to touch on is something that comes from my day job where I work in product development. So I work for like a consulting / educational company, and we work in the field of cross-cultural training, where we do a lot of training talking to people about cultural differences. Here we help them understand themselves and put them in a global context of the range of human behavior so that they can work more effectively with people who don't communicate like them or make decisions like them. Part of what we do when we create new products is iterative design, and that always starts with what is called a minimum viable product, right? You have an idea where you're like, I think this would solve a client's problem, and you make the most minimal version of it that would work. It's not going to have all the bells and whistles and the functions, but you just put it in front of the client. But even before that, you have to know what the problem is that you're solving. So that's why we're on a slide that says solve their problem and has a photo of an astronaut standing, I don't know, maybe in New Mexico, Arizona. There's big red rocks around them. It's supposed to look like Mars. You want to fall in love with your publisher's problems, essentially. Find out what they're having trouble doing on their own and be the solution. So, giving you an example, if a company has a successful game out, but they are also trying to keep a content stream going for their Patreon audience, just so that they are regularly serving up something that's of value for the monthly Patreon cost. If you can bring a project to them and let them know, you know that they have a Patreon feed that they need to fill, and you have something that you think is a perfect match for that Patreon feed, and you know the history of what they've put out in that Patreon feed to say it's a lot like these other projects that you've put in, like you've bought yourself so much instant credibility because you've identified their problem and you're coming with a solution already in hand, right? So a couple of keys to managing to pull this off, to solving a problem for the person you're pitching to. Make sure your idea relates to other stuff that they're doing or have done. The example that I put in here, all scenarios published so far for the game Space Pirate Bastards take place on Mars and its moons. My idea expands the setting to include reverse Mars. So at a glance, you're telling them, I'm already familiar with Space Pirate Bastards. I know all about the setting work that you have done with Mars and its moons. I know that you need more content, and I can add an entire new setting that has not yet been explored. Instant credibility. It also helps to relate your idea to something they're already familiar with. I don't know if you folks have noticed, but somewhere along the line, we all evolved from apes. And the brains that we evolved with are very concerned with conserving caloric output. We are, at our heart, lazy. We don't want to learn new things. If we learn one thing and it works, good. We're going to repeat that forever. We're going to eat nothing but mac and cheese and chicken tendies. Also, I didn't plan that joke. That's ridiculous. So where was I going with this? So you have a little bit to overcome with an original idea, because there's not already a receptor in the brain of the person you're talking to that has your project-sized hole in it, and you have to sort of bridge that gap to convince their monkey brain, this is actually, it may seem new, but this is familiar. It's a lot like stuff you already know, and so it's safe. Monkey brains love things that are safe. So reverse Mars, the slide continues, is almost exactly like Mars, except it has a bunch of cooler stuff. So there we go. Concerns allayed. It's a lot like the thing that you already know. We're not completely upending things. You're not going to have to learn a lot of stuff, except for cool things that you want to know. This is the best part, is attendees in the chat, if you're listening later, are already being convinced that they want to know more about reverse Mars. This is how the pitch works. And one of the best things that you can do, you will look like a magician if you can do this. This comes from the product development field as well. Anticipate questions or challenges. You bring your idea, you know that they're going to start thinking through, yeah, but what are the problems we're going to run into? What do I, as the person that you're pitching to who knows everything, what can I anticipate that maybe you haven't? But you cut them off. If you can say, I know what you're thinking, you're probably thinking that this is going to lead to this problem for you, but I've already solved it. So on the slide, it just says they're going to wonder if reverse Mars contradicts canon, right? So just, I bet we can even brainstorm something better than what I wrote on this slide. Some of the questions that I would have, if I had been publishing a series of Space Pirate Bastard scenarios set on Mars and its moons, I would wonder if reverse Mars was perhaps too close to any other IP. Is there a reverse something that they are cribbing from? And I'm worried that if I adopt their project, reverse Mars feels too much like reverse Riverdale, which is already a thing. So you might say, reverse Mars is influenced by X, Y, and Z, but there is not anything currently on the market like it. We are bringing something new and exciting that recontextualizes the Martian features that you already know and that your audience loves, and we're inviting a whole new bunch of reverse ways that they can interact with it. We have a question in the chat. Wanted to know how Michael identified the Sasquatch-shaped hole in Brindlewood Bay. I wish there was more magic to it, but what it took was I read Brindlewood Bay and I didn't see any Sasquatches. Well, actually, I kind of touched on the fact that mostly it just came from finding that ESPN article and filing it away in the back of my head. So when I started thinking, they were looking for mysteries that weren't set in Brindlewood Bay as well, like these side mysteries with the supernatural elements. So I was thinking, what's also not too far off from Massachusetts East Coast, and the woods of New York are always kind of a nice place to put spooky ideas. So there you go. More than anything, you want to be solving problems or to be seen to be solving problems. We've been going for a while now, so I set a little 3-second break in here. Okay, that's plenty. We should all be recharged, ready to go. Let's talk about the essentials that make up the pitch. We have a good idea. We think it's a fit. We've identified our audience. Now what? What we're going to be talking about for the rest of the presentation is essentially trying to take that miasmatic collection of ideas that you have and boil them down to the most easily digestible version that is also super exciting, and this isn't a real word, but like hooky. We want it to get its hooks into the reader so that they need to know more about it. We want them to be as excited about your idea as you are about it. This is the challenge, right? So there's 3 things that we're going to take a look at. The first is the log line. This is borrowed from the film industry. And then there is a generic, it's like this other thing you already know, which is something that it feels silly even to write it out because I'm pretty sure everybody already knows it, but it's still an important thing to practice. And then last, finding the handful of irresistible details that really sell the flavor and the excitement of your project. Like if you boil it down at its core, what are the coolest things in your idea? Mike Martins, fellow game designer, actually pointed out that this could have been an acronym, ACID, a couple irresistible details. So missed opportunity there on the slide. Not like every self-help guru should have some sort of a 4-letter acronym to sell you. So just pretend that was in there. Okay, so what is a logline? A logline is something that's used by screenwriters primarily, and it's something that accompanies their script when they're trying to get somebody to pick the thing up and turn it into a film project. Film scripts, as you may know, encompassing the entirety of a film's events, they can be kind of long, and ain't nobody got time for that. So, in order to get your script picked up off the pile of other potential scripts that you are competing against, one of the things that you can do to draw attention to it is to write a killer log line. A log line is essentially your attempt to summarize your entire movie in just a couple of words or sentences. Like really, really tight, get all the exciting and important details in there. If you search around online, as I did, you will find people have different ideas about what are the required components to go into a log line. For our purposes, we're mostly going to be thinking about how it helps to have an inciting event, right? A thing has to be happening. That's pretty basic. If there are characters, they should be highlighted. Those characters should have goals. They should have a thing that they want to do, and that needs to be in there. And ideally, you're also talking about antagonistic forces, whether those are embodied by people, creatures, obstacles, circumstances. What is keeping them from immediately getting their goal accomplished and ending the film in 5 minutes? And apparently, I put another slide in here that summarized that even more adeptly than I did. Created a log line for my own project. Condense your project's concept, genre, story, characters, and plots into just 1 or 2 sentences using 25 to 50 words. It is not easy to do. Here's a couple examples to get us kind of familiar with some of the ones that are out there. This first slide starts off with a log line for Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. It says, after a simple jewelry heist goes terribly wrong, the fleeing criminals begin to suspect that one of them is a police informant. Go ahead and take a second, see if you can spot where the inciting incident, characters, goals, and antagonistic forces are. You don't have to type anything, just think it in your head, because in a little while I'm going to get bored and click forward and we'll reveal it. All right, everybody's probably got it by now. There's only 25 to 50 words. Here we go. What's the inciting incident? They were at a simple jewelry heist that went terribly wrong. We're already thrown in the thick of the action. That's exciting. Jewelry heists gone wrong? I want to know more. Who are the characters? They're criminals. What is their goal? To get away, obviously, from the jewelry heist that went wrong. What's in their way? Well, there's a police informant among them. Another great thing, it may even say in a future slide, uh, another thing that really makes these hooky and attention grabbing is if there is some sort of irony in there. So the balance between, in this case, you have a bunch of criminals, and inside, what's the unexpected element? A police informant, the literal opposite, completely unexpected. If your project pitch has some sort of opposing forces like that, that gives you sort of like an ironic edge, oh, brilliant. Brains eat that stuff up. We love it when that happens. All right, ready for another one? Here we go. This from Silence of the Lambs. A young FBI cadet must confide in an incarcerated and manipulative killer to receive his help on catching another serial killer who skins his victims. I'm realizing now it's the same irony in both of these. It's just like cops and criminals working together unexpectedly. I could have gone further afield, but these are the log lines I found that seemed like, well, one, you probably knew the film, and two, it wasn't that hard to match our little segments in here. I'm going to click forward. So our inciting incident, there's a killer out there skinning his victims. That kicks the whole thing off. Holy cats, that's gross. I want to know more. I hope they get caught. We got a character that we care about, the young FBI cadet. Their goal, obviously, catch the serial killer. Two antagonistic forces in this one. Not only the serial killer they're trying to catch, but the manipulative killer who's, manipulating them. Lots of things in the way of their goal. So they fit a lot of excitement into this tiny little log line that makes somebody reading it say, I want to know more about the relationship between this cadet and the killer that they're talking to and trying to get help from. So one fun thing to do is to try and take an idea that you have and see if you can write a log line for it that is as short as these. Can you boil your entire concept down for the thing that you're working on into something this short? Because if you drop something this short into a DM or an email, that's some efficient communication. And here's the thing, your colleagues and peers are already doing this on their very itch pages. Once you learn how to do this sort of thing, it becomes part of your pitch at every step of the journey, not just when you're trying to get someone to publish, but also when you're trying to get an audience to actually buy your thing. This sort of skill is useful all along the journey from ideation to publishing. So on screen, I have a screenshot of Slug Blaster Turbo from its itch.io page. It says, in the small town of Hillview, teenage hoverboarders sneak into other dimensions to explore, film tricks, go viral, and get away from the problems at home. It's dangerous. It's stupid. It's got parent groups in a panic, and it's the coolest thing ever. This is Slug Blaster Turbo. Kind of tells us everything we need to know, right? Who are our protagonists? Teenage hoverboarders doing sick-ass tricks. Those are their goals. They want to get away from their problems at home and be amazing slug blasters. And the antagonistic force, their parents. Kind of implied. Also, just being a teenager is rough. Parents groups in a panic, antagonistic force, right? Everything's all here. You read this small bunch of text and you have an idea about how the whole game runs, right? Basically. I mean, not the mechanics, but enough to get you to say, I want to know more. I want to be a cool skateboarding teen who goes into other dimensions. What do we got next? Fishblade from the itch.io page for the game Fishblade. It reads, first of your name, last of your name. You were wronged by a fisherman, dangled on the end of a line, drowned in air, left for dead. But you did not die, and now you will have your revenge. Also, you've picked up a sword somewhere, and the question of how you wield it is never addressed in this text. Literally, all you need to know. Who's the antagonistic force? The fisherman who left you for dead. What do you want? Revenge. It's right there in the fourth little paragraph. You've got a goal, you've got a relatable character, in this case, yourself, the titular Fishblade. And I bet everybody who has heard this now wants to run out and get themselves a copy of Fishblade. This technique works.
I'm now wanting to see the combined Fishblade and Highlander 2.
Could be, could be. Well, here's the dangerous part. Now you've got the idea. Just got to find a home for it. All right, so this is literally the only interactive bit that I built into this where I remembered, hey, maybe I don't have to talk the whole time. Let's go ahead and practice in the chat if you like, completely optional. But if you've got a piece of media that you know well, you can think of a movie, a book, whatever, maybe even one of your RPG projects if you want to go that far and practice with the thing that you're working on or a thing you've already published. Uh, Try writing a log line for it that effectively sums it up in just 2 sentences or so. Meanwhile, I'm going to drink some water. Apologies to anyone listening to the podcast version of this in the future. We're all quietly working. And honestly, you should be too. I don't care if you're washing dishes or shopping for groceries. Take a break right now and write a log line. Yeah, so I will also say, based on what I'm seeing in the chat, this technique doesn't work for every project. It was designed for screenplays, and screenplays are telling a very particular kind of story. If, for example, you're writing something like an unseen for the between, it's not relevant. You're probably not going to necessarily always find that somebody has a goal in there. Sometimes you're just seeing a slice of life that's meant to evoke a mood or a tone. I will also say that this is something that you can practice in your free time, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be writing log lines. Learning to write more concisely and effectively is a skill that translates into a lot of areas. And this is going to sound weird, but one thing that has really helped me do this is being on social media websites like Twitter, rest in peace. I wonder whatever happened to that website. It's a shame it's dead. Mastodon, and Blue Sky, because these are all websites that give you a fixed character limit. And I recommend this practice to anyone if you have accounts on any of those. Think of a joke that you want to tell and try and tell it within the character limit. because there is nothing quite like trying to find which words in your joke are actually not required to trim them out, and yet you still have something funny that conveys your setup and punchline at the end. uh, Blue Sky and Twitter, rest in peace, uh, have been full of people retelling the Pagliacci joke over and over again, redoing the poem about stealing a nice cold plum out of somebody's fridge. They've been retelling the cask of Amontillado story. They've been, there are all these sort of classics that become joke formats. And the challenge is, how can you get a spin on it and get a punchline and have it fit in one post? Because nobody's gonna, if you do your joke that's like part 1 out of 2, no one's clicking to open the thread. It's just not happening. You got to be punchy in one quick little character limit box, and it's hard as heck. So if you really want to practice honing your editing skills and trying to find out what are the most essential words, this has done wonders for me in finding every unnecessary that gets dropped in there. That is one of the most unneeded words that you will find. These are some great log lines in the chat too. Sorry, podcast people, that you can't see them. It's heartbreaking, but there's some gold in there. Great stuff. Thanks for trying that out, folks. I think you will find it will pay dividends. I even had a little bonus point thing, which is try rewriting it again and make it even shorter the next time you try. You can take that away as something that you can practice after our presentation. So that's log lines. The next super easy technique to pick up, because you already know it, you just didn't think of it as a technique, is it's like this other thing you already know. This is where you tie your idea to a thing that is already familiar by connecting it to context that your audience already has. All right, I found a fun quote from Steve Aylett, who wrote a book of, I believe, writing advice called Heart of the Original. His quote reads, "While many claim to crave originality, they feel an obscure revulsion when confronted with it. The really new is uncomfortable and disturbing. Repetition of the familiar is preferred." By which we mean elevator pitches. That's the other popular way of describing this. Describe your project using this very simple formula. It's like reference crossed with reference. This is also one of the laziest ways to get people to understand what you're doing. And if you take a look at mass market paperbacks, for example, you will see this laziness on the back of so many books where they're like, it's like my thing crossed with Stephen King. Please, if you buy Stephen King's books, please buy mine. It's like my thing crossed with Harry Potter. Rest in peace. I wonder whatever happened to that wizard. It's a shame he died. So what are some examples? Brindlewood Bay, right? Most of us who are on this presentation already know this pitch. As a matter of fact, I think I gave it earlier. It's like Murder, She Wrote crossed with H.P. Lovecraft. If you tell somebody who doesn't even play role-playing games, odds are they will know at least one of those references and can quickly pick up the other if they don't get both. So right here, we have taken a completely unfamiliar concept to them, role-playing game, murder grannies, mysteries, coming up with your own solutions, etc. And we've boiled it down to two things that they might already be familiar with that give them the vibes and get their foot in the door, right? So that you can get their interest piqued and then start working on telling them all the original stuff about it. Butter Princess. I put this in before knowing Brian Sago was going to be here. Brian, your game Butter Princess, it's like Trophy Dark crossed with the Minnesota State Fair. I don't know if you knew that. Now you do. There's your elevator pitch. In case you ever want to say, get on the local news.
But I wasn't supposed to cross it with things. I thought that was like saying it's like Stephen King, buy my thing.
Yes. Here's the ugly truth, right? Which is, it's awful because it's common and because it works. So you'll never get into the cool kids club with this technique, but it works because, again, the monkey brain is happy when it encounters the familiar, tragically. And so we can take advantage of the short circuiting of someone's initial resistance towards a new idea by speaking directly to their monkey brain and saying, look, you're already 80% of the way there. You already know Trophy Dark. You may even know something about the Minnesota State Fair. That's Butter Princess. And like, oh, okay, then I get it. Tell me about the rest of it. You get that first buy-in because at all of our hearts of hearts, we are intellectually lazy. I believe this is something bedrock I think is true about all human beings, and I've read barely enough neuroscience to maybe back it up. I could be wrong. I don't DM me or something. Only if you're a brain scientist. Blades in the Dark. It's like the video game Dishonored crossed with long discussions about positioning and effect and clocks. So it doesn't. It may not always work in every circumstance. Honestly, with Blades in the Dark, if you just tell them it's like a role-playing game crossed with the world of Dishonored. If you've played Dishonored, it's pretty much the same thing. But I would rather put in a punchline than be accurate. Is that all we have? Really? Oh my, whoa, where did we go? Please, no. We've lost the plot. Give me a second. Yeah, I guess that's it. Okay. Our slideshow has taken a brief interruption, but we are back on track and we are looking at a guy putting bags in a box. I don't know. It says number 3, a couple irresistible details. This is the ACID acronym we were talking about. So, a key part of making any pitch and getting somebody excited about your thing is remember the acronym ACID. By including a couple key catchy details, you will get the reader wanting to learn more about what you can deliver, right? The slide itself says include a few details that demonstrate your creative and writing ability. Show that you understand the desired tone. They're going to be testing to see, does this match the other kind of stuff that we can put out, or is it close enough that with some guidance, I believe that this creator could get there. And then finally makes the reader want to learn more. So this is where in Squatch Your Step, the couple of key details were things like the ridiculous name Champlain Bellows, I honestly think helped sell it because it is the sort of ludicrous East Coast old family sort of name that appears in much of the other Brindlewood Bay canonical mysteries. Talking about a couple different side characters, for example, or the setting. These are all like key details that sort of show, yes, I have given some thought to what the final form of this is going to be. I have a clear idea, and I think these are the bits that you're going to find exciting, including picture people at a table all bellowing at each other and pretending to reason out what sort of a score out of 10 they would give everybody's Sasquatch call. So always think about, what do I personally think is the most exciting thing about my project, and how do I convey that, again, concisely to the person that I'm making the pitch to? Good things to think about, including sensory details tend to be pretty good just as seasoning, no matter what sort of a pitch you're making. Again, that sort of goes into showing your creative and writing ability. And all of the previous things that we talked about for knowing your audience, if the details that you're picking, each and every one of them are demonstrating that you have a familiarity with their body of work and the sorts of things that they're likely to put out, you are building that confidence in them that they can take a chance on you, that you can actually deliver the sort of experience that you're talking about. Because ideas are cheap. They can talk to 20 people and get 200 ideas, but can you actually create a thing that will work for them and that will sell to an audience? I'm not going to talk about Squatch Your Step now. I did it earlier. I'm having a conversation, podcast people, with my own slides, one of which is out of place, or it's like those There's a word for it. You know how whales used to have back legs and now they're gone? The hell's the word for those kind of
Vestigial.
bones? Vestigial. Thank you. This is a whale back feet kind of slide. Vestigial slide. We can see where it evolved from. Fascinating. It's like a peek into time. All right. Here's the bit where, thank God, I'm not calling anybody out. So I got a chance to witness a number of people over the years making their in-person pitches, and I have noticed there are some common mistakes that people make. And these temptations are there for all of us. Don't think you're immune. The first one on my list of common mistakes, self-deprecation. Purge it from your mind before you pitch. No one's going to believe in your idea if you don't believe in your idea. It doesn't matter how much doubt you have. I'm going to let you in on a dirty secret. Every single artist is racked with self-doubt, believes themselves to be an imposter, doesn't know how they have ever created any of the things they've ever created, doubts they'll ever manage to do it again. Set all that aside. That doesn't matter at the point that you're pitching. When you're pitching, it's all about confidence in your idea. Your idea is good. If it wasn't, why would you be wasting the other person's time? They're busy. They got another 20 people who have 200 ideas that they want to run past them. Be your own best advocate. I'll also do a little detour here to talk about the creative method because I think that this is kind of interesting. It has been observed that there are essentially two different lenses that your brain has to tap into when you are a creative person. One of them is the generative idea making part of you that comes up with the new ideas and is executing. And this is where you get first drafts and ideation and brainstorming. And then there is a second rational, mean-hearted editor that has taste and thinks that what the first brain did is dog shit and needs to be beaten into shape until it's good. Each of these voices serve a purpose and they come into play at different parts in the creative project. Many of us creatives get hung up when the editorial brain, which is mean, starts viewing stuff too early. This is your self-deprecating voice. This is the voice that's telling you you can't do it because you haven't done it and the idea you have isn't good enough yet. If you are hearing those self-deprecating voices, you are listening to your editorial brain too early. Tell them to shut up, take a break, go get a coffee, smoke break, come back later. We're still in the ideation phase. We're still in the creative phase. We don't need to hear that yet. That voice is going to be very handy when it comes to the point of improving what we're working on and getting it to its final polished form. That mean son of a bitch is useful, but they need to know their time and place, and they frequently don't. Don't be afraid to tell that voice to take a walk. Okay, next. Too much detail. Assume the person that you are pitching to is short on time, only share your best, punchiest bits. The whole reason we just spent the better part of an hour talking to you about taking your idea, boiling it down, trying to find the key details that sell your idea in like seed form is because the more efficient you are at getting your pitch across, the better it will land. If you win them over immediately, they hear a Sasquatch call and they hear about Champlain Bells and they're like, sold. Don't ruin your good impression by continuing to tell them every half idea that you have about the rest of it. We're like, I'm kind of thinking maybe there's going to be 5 or 6 side characters. I don't know. Maybe one of them's got a tricycle. I haven't quite figured it out. They're not there to brainstorm with you. They are not your creative partner. They don't need to know the half thought of stuff. They don't need to know your process. They don't need to know how much thought you've put into the thing before you made the pitch. It is super easy once you find a sympathetic ear. Oh, how we artistic types love a sympathetic ear. We want to talk about our work. We want to talk about our method. The people you're pitching to are not collaborators. It's the wrong context. Fight that urge. Cut off every unnecessary bit of fat when you are talking about your project and trying to get somebody to give you money for it. Also, this is a big one. In role playing, many of us, if you are motivated enough to be listening to any of this, you've probably been a GM in your time. You've probably learned all of the game and so have walked other people through an experience where you want to surprise them with something. Uh, that's a completely different skill set from the pitch. Don't worry about spoilers. Don't hold back your big twist or reveal. You want to put the coolest thing about it forward. So, my brain was just telling me, hey, why don't you pick a movie that has a twist and then we'll talk about how you would lead by spoiling it? I don't know what movies you've watched. Let's not do that. Let's pretend there's a movie about the Invisible Man. All right? Hypothetically. And at the end, it's revealed the Invisible Man was George Washington who traveled through time and learned to be invisible, and he's been causing all sorts of trouble. If you're pitching this movie or this role playing project or whatever, you start with there's an invisible man and he's terrorizing everybody. And at the end, it's revealed it's George Washington. The person who you're trying to pitch to needs to know the big cool parts. They don't need the twist. Don't hold that back like, oh man, when you read all of my pitch all the way to the end and you find out the twist, that's not how they're experiencing your work. So you can build twists in, you can build all sorts of surprises in, but if that's the coolest thing about what you're doing, if you're M. Night Shyamalaning it and you got a twist, you got to tell them. Because it's the same way that you would try and talk a friend into going to see one of these things. No, it's not, because you wouldn't tell your friend the spoiler. Forget I said that. Who knows what I was talking about a couple seconds ago? Disregard. Strike it from the record. Uh, you might tell them there is a twist, but the person publishing needs to know all the cool stuff, right? Don't hold anything back. Also, I wish this was less of a common mistake. Don't write the whole thing in advance. Not if you're trying to sell it. Here's why. This may seem counterintuitive. You're like, yeah, but I had all these ideas, and then I actually made it into a thing, and it's done. And now all I have to do is find someone to buy it. Well, the person who wants to buy it may have some different ideas about what they require than you do. And it can be heartbreaking if you feel like you've got a whole thing that is done and polished and you really think it's good. And then they're like, well, actually, I need you to, throw out 50% of it in order to more match our tone or the sort of stuff we're doing. Also, again, we talked about how you're only on this planet and alive for so long, and you only have so many hours to work on projects. If we are trying to turn some of those into paid gigs, you need to optimize the time that you're spending, and time spent on writing is at a premium. Ideally, you get the project to the point where your pitch is solid, and then you stop until someone is willing to pay you to finish the rest of it. Because they're probably going to become a collaborator at some point. They may hook you up with an editor. They may hook you up with a layout artist who's going to tell you, hey, we need this stuff to fit. And now all of the sentences need to be 50 words exactly to fit in the columns that we have. And you're like, well, now you're going to spend a lot of time hacking apart your darlings. Maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. I'm just trying to say, maybe think about also being a little bit more mercenary about it. Or if you loved a thing enough to write the whole thing in advance, maybe you're better off not selling it, except selling it directly to your audience yourself. Maybe you want to self-publish. If that's a thing that meant so much to you that you wanted to write it from top to bottom. Because the moment that you're pitching it to somebody else, you are beholden to their ideas about what the final product should be. As soon as they've paid for it, they are also going to assume some privileges, like the ability to edit or rewrite. Sometimes that's great. You see them punch up your stuff and you're like, man, that's a great idea. I wish I had thought of that. Other times they make odd changes and you're like, I really wish they had asked me to come up with something for that version, but I guess they were short on time and they lost my email. It happens. What else have we got in this presentation? Whoa, we went a little bit too far. We did the old double tap. This slide I left in part because it drives layout people insane. And I got this off of Google Slides. For anyone just listening, this slide is labeled how it works. And there's like a 6-square grid where it goes like picture, text, picture, text, picture, text. And for some reason, the numbers 1, 2, and 3, 1 starts in the lower left, and then 2 is in the middle, and 3 is in the lower right. Like nobody reads. This is what corporate America does to people. Someone thought that this was reasonable. And I loved it because it was so wrong. So I've put the last three sort of summary points in here. So one, when pitching, reduce your idea to its core components. Figure out what to you is the most exciting part of your idea. Lead with it. Two, the perfect fit. Make sure that what you're pitching matches what's needed. This is where all the research in advance comes in. Pitch to somebody who is already primed to appreciate your idea and the work that you've already put into it. And three, bait the hook. Let your own enthusiasm become infectious so your audience wants more. If you can sort of internalize these three principles, you should be in pretty good shape. That is about all that I know how to teach you. So then we have a big thank you slide and an invitation to hit me up if you ever want to talk about your project or practice any of this stuff. We made it an hour and 10 minutes into our slot, which means, oh boy, we've got so much time for a freewheeling discussion and a Q&A if anyone is in the mood to do that. Amanda, I see a hand raised.
Before we jump into the Q&A, why don't you tell us where we can find you on Discord, Blue Sky, or your email for those listening to the podcast?
Okay, podcast person, you're gonna have to pause your podcast app and like go into another. I hope you have a browser on your device. If you're listening to this on a Zune, I can't help you. I can be found on Discord and Blue Sky as Signal Station, SIGNAL STATION. I own the domain signalstation.com, so you can email anything at signalstation.com and it'll reach me. You can type in Michael. You can type in literally any other string of words, alphanumeric characters, or whatever. If it ends in at Signal Station, it'll find me. Thumbs up. All right, is everybody ready to go out there and pitch the world? Or have we identified already some giant gaping holes in our theory of everything?
I've got a thing I want to pitch. It's kind of like Devil Aim for Me meets Squatcher's Step. I think you might be interested in it. It's sort of a gap in your current collection and what your current offerings are.
Here's the thing, I'm familiar with both of those, and so I'm already invested and want to hear more. I like those
Wow, it
things.
does work.
It does work. I already found my left hand reaching for my wallet. Oh my God, it's like magic.
I would like to advocate for chaotic voiced concern in the chat about struggling with naming the antagonist in their stuff, his stuff. And I think that's an interesting point. And I was thinking about story structure, which for people who aren't aware, we definitely talked about in what was definitely completely kosher office hours last night. And so I was thinking about the different types of stories that you plugged last night and how they might have different key elements to maybe plug in a similar logline. Anyway, but I don't know if that's off base, and so I think my question is that right? Or if there is a different way to think about story structure if you don't have like a concrete antagonist, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, that's fair. Before I attempt an answer, Chaotic, did you want to expand on what your project is?
Just more or less, like I have like several projects that there really isn't an antagonistic force to the players. Like there is no bad guy, there is no sort of like, in some of them there is like no major conflict in the sort of Western ideal of like conflict of being like something that is externalized outside of yourself or internalized by having like sort of character growth. And the one that does have conflict, I am not sharing here because I would get truly canceled for that one.
All right. Are there obstacles though?
No. I I suppose, like, what is an obstacle? Like,
Great question. Anything that keeps your protagonist character types from immediately achieving their goal. So, to give you perhaps an example, there's a game called Swords Without Master,
mhm.
where it's GMless, and you roll a couple of dice at each round. But these are really minimal mechanics, and all they do is they tell you the tone of the next part of the story that you're telling. It's a game that is designed to more or less recreate what it's like to just have a bunch of friends sitting around telling a story about true heroes, right? And other players will say, I would love to see your character overcome this kind of an obstacle, and they might invent it. But the obstacle in this case has no mechanical weight because there are no rules around overcoming it. It's just narrative. So a person might say, your character, let's just assume there's some sort of, just for the sake of genre convention, they're a Conan the Barbarian type. Might say, I want your character to triumph against a bunch of skeletons. So in this next scene, let's assume you've journeyed down into a dangerous place and you invent the obstacle. And then the other person is just invited to tell the story about how awesome their character is and how completely they overcome the obstacle. In this way, the game itself doesn't come with obstacles. I wouldn't even make that part of the pitch for Swords Without Master. Instead, the focus would be on the game structure itself. I think you would talk about how this is if I were to pitch it to friends saying, let's play this, say, imagine a completely open-ended story game about heroic adventure that goes back and forth between two tones, a heroic tone and a gloomy tone, a melancholy tone. And you establish themes as you play. And by the end of it, we will have seen some kind of epic adventure, but it's only bound by our own imagination. And we invent the setting and the characters collectively.
Mhm.
That's too many words. So the next version that I would attempt would be to find out which parts of those concept, which parts of that description are actually key to understanding the concept. And am I describing the thing that is most exciting about Swords Without Master? So if you were trying to convince a friend to come and play the thing that you're working on, what do you think is the most exciting thing about it? What would entice them the most to undertake this experience?
God, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So I think that kind of proves the point that this sort of pitching thing is actually a skill that can
Mhm.
be acquired, and it just takes practice. And also asking these sort of questions. What is the part of this project I'm most excited about, and that I think other people will be most excited about? It's a framework that you put on your project, and it may not be evident when you first start a project or when you have the initial idea, and that conception may change over time. You may start a game project thinking it's about X, but by the time you've written a bunch of it, you're like, actually, it really seems like it's about Y, and your pitch changes. So a pitch has to be flexible to match your current conception
Mhm.
of the work itself. Thanks, Kuroda, for dropping in the chat the classic struggle structures of
Mhm.
narrative. There's many of those listers, like there's only so many kinds of stories, and they can be broken down to lists of like there's man versus man, there's man versus nature, man versus technology, man versus self. So in each of those, your protagonist has some kind of an opposing force, even it's themselves getting in their own way. Um, a story of an alcoholic struggling with their addiction could very well be man versus self, someone struggling with their own bad habits. And you can get an effective narrative out of that sort of a story.
Mhm.
Not all of these are going to be applicable in every sense. These are obviously some very broad terms to start thinking of narrative structure.
Mhm.
Anyone else have any other questions or thoughts while we're hanging out?
You mentioned finding the problem to solve when you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about how you want to get in there and solve problem. Now, at work, I do this all the time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I can see what the problems are and I can pitch something for work as a solution. But it's a lot more tricky when you don't know all of the ins and outs of, let's say, a publisher. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say I had a really cool idea for, I don't know, D&D thing, and I wanted to pitch to wizards about
Mm-hmm.
it. There's so much D&D out there. There's no possible way I could go through all of it and really understand as well as I might be feel. Again, this is the confidence thing.
Mm-hmm.
um but to figure out what problem they're having,
Right.
how would you go about that?
There's two approaches, right? When you're in product development, the easiest way to do it is to talk to existing clients, which is honestly easier than any of us artistic types can do on our own. Because if you are already in some sort of a business and have a client pool, you can do what are called customer interviews. And that's where you just sit down with someone and say, hey, tell me about how your job is going. What are the things you're really struggling with? Because more than anything, you want to know about where the pain points are at their job so that you can develop a solution for them. They say, I'm having a really hard time getting my employees in the Boston office to work effectively with their colleagues in the Dublin office. There's been a lot of complaints about missed deadlines. They're not communicating very well. They're not building relationships terribly well. And so you might think, okay, what kind of a solution can I build or offer that might help for these two particular teams? We don't generally get that opportunity when it comes to a publisher. There's no way I can sit down with someone from Wizards of the Coast and say, hey, tell me about how it's been going for you last quarter. How are the stock options going? What's selling? What's not selling? What are you hoping to add to your product mix? Sometimes you have to do your own research from the outside and find out what other people who have more insider knowledge than you have been gleaning. Some of it can also just come down to your own judgment about their product fit in the industry and what seems like it's being effective for them and what you might think they might be missing out on. So if we want to go Wizards of the Coast, right? I think in our independent storytelling circles, a lot of us hear conversationally that one of the problems Wizards of the Coast has is that their pool of players are falling in love with Critical Role, uh, a a kind of a rival brand, but also a demonstration of a way to play their game that their game doesn't actually support. The rules don't actually teach you how to have a critical role type experience, which means that their fandom may shift their focus from Wizards of the Coast directly to Critical Role. Um, there's also news that comes out about how the owners of the IP are trying to find ways to get people to keep buying it over and over again. They don't just want you to buy the 3 books and be done. They want you to buy merchandising. They want you to buy the books again in a couple of years. They want you to buy expansions. So just by picking up news like this, you might think, okay, what can I pitch them that I'm interested in doing that meets one of these needs? Either helps put their IP in a new space or helps to bridge the gap between their rule set and their Critical Role audience. I feel like this is something that Critical Role is trying to solve themselves and lure their players away to their own brand and their own in-house gaming systems. But yeah, you can't always get it straight from the horse's mouth. Sometimes you have to deduce what the problems are just based on conversations and news items in the industry. But if you get a chance to just meet and chat with somebody, that's obviously the best. So if you know a publisher that, for example, signs up to give office hours for anybody who wants to swing by, and you can just find out from them, hey, how's things going? What are you struggling with? What's the hardest thing about your job as a publisher these days? Get them to open up. It's gold. Get a question in the chat. Do you ever make any collage boards of inspiring images while you think of new projects, or how do you best gather Inspiration. Um, I don't use collage boards, but I know a lot of people do. When I'm gathering, I think I've got a magpie like brain, right? So I'm always reading, whether it's random stuff on the internet, whether it's a pile of multiple books at the same time. I'm watching films all the time and just collecting info. So I find that inspiration is just going to come from any direction. Sometimes it comes from an ESPN blog about a Sasquatch call contest. Um, but I don't think that method works for everybody because that's just the way my brain works. Like I sometimes joke that it's literally full of garbage that in most situations is not useful. What it is good for is ideation and brainstorming, making unexpected connections between two different ideas, and also making new friends. Because I feel like most people that I meet, whatever they're into, I probably know a little bit about it and know enough to express an interest and get genuinely excited in what they're enthusiastic about. But that's a good question. Let's see, did I miss anything else in the chat? Saw my own avatar popping up because my wife has joined in my account. And we also have a note that I tend to watch and read stuff on topics to deliberately do the opposite of what's already out there. Um, this is also true. So we talked about how your pitch can be improved by including irony, right? Including some unexpected element that builds tension, and that tension demands release. Like we want to know, how is this tension going to be solved? And the pitch doesn't give you that release of tension, which is what makes it hooky, that they want more. Like, how are they going to catch that monster who's been skinning people in Silence of the Lambs? The log line's not going to tell you. By the same token, my brain is really hardwired for novelty to the point where I don't like just recreating what other people have done. So I'm usually trying to recognize patterns and then try and play against that pattern or against that trope. Or if I can't do that, introduce some sort of external vector that doesn't immediately match as a way to insert something that feels novel to a project. Which is, again, is kind of a, this is less about how to pitch and more about just how I come up with ideas for projects. We have a note that a thing that it's easy to struggle with as an artistic type person is to figure out, what do people even desire in games? Identifying that aspect is hard. That is 100% true. Um, yeah, it gets, because there are a wide variety of types of human beings. Some people score a lot higher or have more skills when it comes to figuring out the perspectives of others and identifying what their desires are, and just sort of like using those mirror neurons to put themselves in the shoes of other people and picture the world from their perspective and think, based on their behavior, based on what they're saying, I think that this is how they're thinking about things, and I can use that to build a model of what they want and try and meet that need. That's a skill set. It can be built, but it also comes more naturally to some people than others. Um, it's a great additional comment in the chat. Sometimes people themselves don't know what they want until you give it to them. So there is a lot to be said about the fact that every artist, in creating something new and unique to them, it is de facto original because they're the only person that could create it. They're the only person that has had the lived experience that led them to the point where they can make this creative work. And that means there's an adjustment for any other person who has not lived their life to absorb the meaning of that project. I think this is essentially the bridge that we're trying to overcome when we talk about pitching, right? We're already in love with our idea. We want to make a thing, and we're hoping that it's going to find an audience, and there's no real way to guarantee that. And like every artist throughout history has struggled with that. The worst is when you see an artist who was genuinely good at what they did, but they didn't find an artist in their, they didn't find their audience in their lifetime. Look at Franz Kafka, for example. Guy's writing these weird little stories about people waking up as bugs, and he's doing it like part time from his office job. Like he's slacking at work. He's writing these weird little stories. He's all torn up thinking that he's not any good at this, right? This is another individual plagued by low self worth and not a lot of confidence in his own work. He shows his pal Max Broad some of his stuff. Max is like, actually, this is pretty good. You should do something with it. He's like, nah. He passes away, and in his will, he leaves instructions asking Max to throw all of his manuscripts into the fire and burn them. He does not want to leave a legacy behind. His friend Max says, well, you're dead, so who cares what you want, Franz Kafka? I'm actually going to put your stuff out, and now school kids read the Metamorphosis, and we're all like, this guy was a genius, but didn't find an audience in his lifetime. Kind of a rough thing for all of us to think that every single one of us engaged in an artistic pursuit are not guaranteed the audience that we deserve. But the rough thing is we got to do it anyway, because that's the kind of people that we are. We have these impulses. We are made happy by acting on these impulses. There is value in the work we create, even if it doesn't find an audience. And I'm just trying to give you a couple tips for how to try and find that audience. Here are some of the things that'll help bridge from your lived experience and your understanding of your work to a way that another human being might conceivably open their heart a little bit to find room for it. And that's by leaning forward with what is strongest about your work and about your voice and about your vision. Go out and tell people the coolest thing about where you're working on, because what you're working on is genuinely cool. They need to know it. And if it takes using a terrible analogy like the thing I've created is like this mixed with this, it's like train spotting, but on crack. Please don't do that. That's awful. Yeah, we're just trying to come up with answers to the eternal question of I'm trapped, my brain is trapped inside this skull, and I only have this one perspective, and how do I communicate this lived experience to another human being? And we're all going to struggle with that our whole lives. Luckily, those who've come before us have found some of these techniques that have generally worked for them, and sometimes it leads to, remuneration, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes writing and creating a thing leads you to meeting some of the coolest, most creative people in your life, because they read your thing and they vibe with it, and then you just end up with something that's honestly more valuable than a paycheck, which is peers. People who are actually doing cool stuff and think your stuff is cool. And I think that's the real end goal. Do I believe there is such a thing as pitching too early? Yeah, probably. I feel like in order to make a pitch, I feel like a title, a catchy title helps, just to set the tone, right, of whatever you're working on. And I think you have to have, if you don't yet have those key details and how they work together, if everything is still feeling nebulous for you, I, I feel like don't try and pitch when you're still in the brainstorming phase. If you yourself don't know what the thing is yet, remember the publisher is not a collaborator. They don't want to work through your ideas with you. That's what your peers are for. So yeah, run it past your peers and they can help you get it to the point where it feels firm enough that you're like, no, I know what my bullet points are. I know what the selling points are of my project. Yeah, if everything goes well, people get so excited about what you're working on and creating that a whole retreat forms around it. You get to meet all sorts of new and cool people. Maybe that's a good note to end on. No more questions. Don't ruin my beautiful moment. No, but seriously, let me go back to the last slide. If anybody wants to reach out at any point, talk about pitches, ideas, the artistic life. I love talking about this stuff. I love hearing people's ideas. Definitely ping me about it, and also ping everybody else here at the retreat. Make your artistic journey everybody's problem. That's my advice. We're all in this together, like it or not. Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate you taking a chunk of your evening out and hanging out. This has been fun.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye, all.
Bye, everybody.